Coming up on Global Business, Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in Beijing. We look into the highlights of economic relations between the two sides. European aviation giant Airbus said on Thursday that it will open a second final assembly line in China, and we spoke to the company's CEO to get his expectations on China's business environment. A private survey of China's services sector shows activity jumping to a 28-month high as robust new orders and job creation boosts the sector's recovery. From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is Global Business and I am Lily Lu. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in Beijing. During the meeting, President Xi said that relations between the two sides have maintained a positive and steady momentum. Xi Jinping said that China is willing to promote cooperation in agriculture, aviation, aerospace, and energy. He also called on the two countries to work closely on the China-France Culture and Tourism Year and the Paris Olympics, which takes place next year. Xi said that China is willing to maintain close communications and cooperation with France in international organizations and also to promote multilateralism. He mentioned that China will restart dialogue with the European Union and hope that France will take a leading role. President Macron spoke highly on the bilateral ties in the past 6 decades. He said that the two nations have achieved mutual benefits in various fields and made progress in addressing global challenges. He hoped to strengthen cooperation with China and promote people-to-people exchanges. Chinese Premier Li Qiang said that China will promote its comprehensive strategic partnership with France to a higher level. He made the remarks today during his meeting with President Macron. Li called on the two nations to strengthen cooperation in all fields. He also stressed on the importance of holding the China-EU leaders' meeting to promote world peace. President Macron highlighted the importance of strengthening communication between France and China. He said that France is willing to promote cooperation with China as well as communication on global issues and also make contributions toward world peace and development. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has met with President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen in Beijing. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang also attended the meeting. Premier Li said that relations between China and Europe have global influence. The two sides need to overcome interference and difficulties and focus on consensus to promote healthy and stable development of China-Europe relations. Li also said that China is willing to work with the EU to oppose decoupling and breaking chains and uphold true multilateralism, addressing global challenges, as well as to create better cooperation between China and Europe for the next 20 years. Von der Leyen said that the interests of Europe and China are closely intertwined. Europe is willing to work with China to strengthen high-level dialogue, maintain market openness, deepen cooperation in various fields, and lead the international community to jointly address global challenges. And now to get some perspectives from the business community on the French side, we are now crossing to Ross Cullen, who is in Paris. Hi there, Ross. Tell us, how are businessmen in Paris perceiving their president's visit to China?
Well, it's very important, this relationship between the world's second biggest economy and the European Union, a market of 500 million people. And we did see that underscored by Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen in their discussions regarding the business links, the commercial ties. Ursula von der Leyen has just finished speaking. She was giving a news conference and then taking questions from reporters. And she was describing that there are some difficulties. There are critical trade imbalances that both sides need to overcome, particularly questions over the sharing of sensitive national information. But she did say that more positively that China and the European Union have agreed to restart the high-level economic and trade dialogue between the two sides and the high-level digital dialogue between the two sides, calling for Brussels and Beijing to follow up on this as soon as possible. Also, we know that Airbus, which is one of the world's two biggest plane manufacturers along with Boeing, Airbus has said that it wants to double the capacity of the airlines that it produces inside China. So pointing to increased ties there on the commerce side, and dozens of business executives were travelling with Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen, underscoring just how important the business side is to these discussions.
Now tell us, Ross, how do they see the future of economic relations between China and France and broader China and the EU after Macron's visit?
Yeah, they do see it as critical importance, this link between Paris, Brussels and Beijing when it comes to trade. Also, as you mentioned in the introduction, working together on global strategic issues. The two leaders did evoke the situation in Ukraine, which China describes as a crisis, which Russia describes as a special military operation, and which Ukraine, the EU and France all describe as a war, saying that it is of incredible importance to the European Union that this situation is resolved as quickly as possible. And as regards the future relationship between Beijing, Brussels and Paris, they do want to be able to work together with President Xi, calling on China to play a, quote, major role in accelerating the transition towards peace in Ukraine. China does want to see a political solution and a ceasefire as soon as possible in Ukraine, and we know that there is that close relationship between President Putin and President Xi, so we know that Ursula von der Leyen and Emmanuel Macron are committed to improving the ties between China and the European Union, but they do see that working together on this issue of peace in Ukraine is of importance as well.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. That's Ross Cullen in Paris. European aviation giant Airbus said on Thursday that it will open a second final assembly line in China to double its production capacity in the country. Earlier, my colleague Guan Xin spoke to Guillaume Faury, CEO of the company, to get his perspectives on bilateral cooperation and expectations on China's business environment. Take a look.
In light of the growing emphasis on sustainability and green energy in China, how does Airbus align its priorities with China's zero carbon goals?
Well, the aviation as a whole has taken the objective to be carbon neutral by 2050. At Airbus, we took the lead very early in the process before the pandemic to decarbonize the aviation and our own activities. There are different steps. The first step is to deliver the current generation of planes because they burn by far less fuel and therefore less emissions. And on top, they're capable of 50% of sustainable aviation fuels. So we can start to use those fuels and decarbonize. We're preparing the next generation of planes that will again reduce the fuel burn by around 25%, and they will be capable of 100% of sustainable aviation fuels. So that's the way to go to 2050 with planes that will be fully decarbonized and economically viable with more expensive sustainable aviation fuels. And on the longer term, at Airbus, we have launched the development of the first hydrogen-powered plane for entry into service in 2035. So we have a full range of products to go to the decarbonized aviation of the future.
I look forward to it. Well, China is also pushing ahead in its renewable energy. How is the cooperation with China's renewable energy sector?
We are at the beginning of the ramp-up of sustainable aviation fuels. We are very happy to sign an agreement this week on the sustainable aviation fuel with the fuel provider here in China for all airports and companies, with the objective to contribute to the 10% of use of SAF by 2030. And that's what we would be targeting for China with this agreement.
Well, China has reiterated its commitment to further opening up to the world and make high-quality use of foreign investments. What do you think about China's business environment?
We keep investing consistently with what we have done so far. That has been quite successful. We grow the capacity, especially for the single aisle. That is a very big success story for Airbus and for China here in country. And with the reopening of the world, the reopening of China to the world, we think that's the direction that we're right to believe in. So yeah, we are very optimistic for the future. I'm here to contribute to further investment in China. Airbus is investing, Airbus is growing in China. So we believe in the growth. We like the ability to do business here. We have a very good cooperation with several partners of the aviation sector that has been beneficial for Airbus, and we keep working in that spirit of a good cooperation with our partners here in China.
Well, it is time to recap French President Macron's busy day today in Beijing and to have more discussions on the important relations between China and France. In today's meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and his counterpart Emmanuel Macron, the two leaders shook hands on deepening China-France and China-EU cooperation in various fields. We are now joined by our guests, Mr. Liu Mingli, a research professor at the Institute of European Studies of China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, and Professor François Bourguignon, Emeritus Chair at the Paris School of Economics. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time to join us on the show. May I start with Professor Bourguignon, who is in Paris. First of all, can I get your assessment of the China-France ties in light of the complex global environment at this time?
No, I believe that those ties are rather satisfactory. China is the seventh a client of French exports and the seventh importer in France. There is a rather big deficit of bilateral trade against France, but this is the way things have been for quite some time. Part of it is compensated by the Chinese tourism in France, and we certainly hope that with the reopening of China, tourists will come back to France in a big number. But I believe that the point is not so much France, it is really Europe. And when we look at Europe and we consolidate Europe in the sense that we look at the trade between Europe and the rest of the world, not with other European countries, then China is really a big partner, because China would represent something like 20% or maybe a little more of total trade between the EU and the rest of the world. So from that point of view, we can say that ties are quite strong, and for the moment, there is no reason to believe that things would change very much in the coming years.
Okay, great answer. And let me get to Professor Liu. What do you think are the key words in China-France relations now?
I think the relations between China and France is beyond bilateral ones, because from this visit, we can see that President Macron is with President Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, which shows that President Macron has put the bilateral relations of the two countries into a broader view, at least at European levels. Actually, in the global context, when we take a look at the world, I don't think it is in a very easy condition. We have to face many challenges, including climate change, and the geopolitical crisis in Europe is not over yet. And we also have to be cautious about the financial risks in the financial market. So the France and China have to work together to address these challenges. I'm not sure it's enough to handle this, but the cooperation between the two countries is necessary. And for the time being, I think it's also good because President Macron is still in his first year of his second term. And for China, here we have the new government after 2 sessions. I think the two governments can work together with each other for years, so they can commit to some medium and long-term issues. For example, the sustainable development, also including the retirement age reform in France, and also the reform in China to achieve sustainable development. So I think the bilateral ties between China and France is beyond bilateral one. Shows a new kind of multilateral cooperation from this visit by President Macron.
All right, Professor Bourguignon, it is reported that China and France recently completed their first LNG trade in the Chinese yuan. What is your view on this development, and could we expect more cooperation in the financial sector?
I think that the kind of cooperation that can be expected is of a different type depending on the time horizon that one is looking at. It is difficult to imagine that macroeconomic policies could be coordinated in any tight way because of very different context in the two economies, in Europe and in China. But we must make sure that in times of crisis, in times of instability in the global economy and in particular in financial markets, then it will be possible for the two big countries, the European Union and or the Eurozone, maybe more than the European Union, and China to certainly cooperate in stabilizing the global economy. And I don't see any reason at this stage for this not being possible. There is nothing against this in the two countries. And again, in the past, we have not seen any big divergence from that point of view. So I am pretty confident that for the future.
Professor Liu, do you think that this latest development that we were talking about is one example of the two countries deepening economic and financial cooperations to fend off external risks? And what is your take on that?
I think we have reasons to expect more cooperations in the financial sector. For example, from France side, I think the country is working hard to become a more influential financial hub in the European continent. Under the background of Brexit, we know London used to serve the most important financial hub, but after the Brexit, situation has changed. Some business has relocated from London to the European continent, and there are some cities who have the potential to become more influential in terms of financial services, and Paris is one of them. And in recent years, we have found some new policy change, more business-friendly change in France. They welcome financial institutions to run business in Paris. And they also welcome financial talents to work there. So it's reasonable for Chinese enterprises to get some financial services in the Paris market. For example, I think China can consider issue sovereign bond as well as corporate bonds in the Paris financial market. In the meanwhile, here in China, I think China is committed to new round of opening up and reform, including financial sector. I think here in China, we can find the momentum is coming back. We have many more economic activities which need to be supported by financial services. I think it is a good opportunity for French financial enterprises to run business here in China. And also, I can think the two sides can cooperate in terms of trade denominations in yuan or euro. Because in recent years, Europeans, including France, had been advocating the increase the international use of euro as a major international currency. And here in China, I think China is also seeking peaceful development, and the renminbi has a promising future as an international currency. So the two sides consider more cooperations in terms of currency. For example, they can consider the bilateral trades to be denominated in yuan or euro. Yes. I think that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Liu Mingli. Thank you very much. And let me get to Professor Bourguignon for a final question. Do you see the need of more macro policy coordination between the two countries in light of what we just discussed, that the two countries need to deepen their financial and economic cooperation to fend off external risks? And how do you value the financial stability in light of the recent banking turmoil in the US and Europe and its possible impact on economic recovery?
But this financial turmoil is really more a US story than a European story. Basically, we see here a difference in the way in which the financial regulation, which was decided after the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, have been applied on the two sides. The reason why there was a problem in the US was basically because the failing bank, the SVB, was not reported or not considered as a systemic bank. because it was the 16th bank in the US, and basically this bank didn't have to follow the rules which had been decided a few years before to regulate financial markets. This is not true in Europe. In Europe, most banks have to follow the rules, and what happened with SVB would not happen with French banks. I'm not saying that European banks are not affected by the increase in the interest rates. All the banks are being affected by that. But there is certainly not the kind of risk that we have seen as the consequence of the shock on the SVB in the US. Now, you could say that the Swiss banks have not been doing very well lately, in particular the Credit Suisse, which has just been bought by UBS in a kind of emergency rescue, is certainly not a good sign. But this is not a problem of the banking system. The Credit Suisse story is essentially a problem of a single bank, which made mistakes and which for years has been non-profitable, and many people knew that this bank would have problems. Now, the problems did appear because of the shock on the international banking system due to the Silicon Valley Bank story. But I don't think that there is any danger on the European side. And for the moment, the financial systems are rather resisting all those shocks. And I think that we can be confident for the future. On the other hand, we could also see that China has also its banking problems. And it is fortunate that Evergrande was able to get an agreement with the foreign creditors lately, because as in many countries in the world, it is true that there is a kind of over-indebtedness in China that is possibly the source of instability. This is also the case in the US and the case of Europe. So we must be careful, but I don't see any danger in the next next months or even a few years.
Okay, great stuff. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much. That's Professor François Bourguignon, Emeritus Chair at the Paris School of Economics for us. Business relations are an important aspect of President Macron's visit to China. He is accompanied by a delegation of around 60 business leaders. Our reporter Wang Tianyu sat down with one of the delegates, Sabrina Suzanne, CEO and chairman of the French-based utility company Suez. The company's history in China can be traced back to 1975, and it now aims to play an active role in China's ecological transition. Take a look.
This visit is an excellent opportunity to strengthen ties between France and China. It is positive news for the business community that we are all here today. Suez has a long history in China. We were the first foreign environmental company to enter China, contributing to China's infrastructure development for nearly half a century. I am so proud of that successful cooperation. During this visit, I am privileged to speak at the plenary session of the Franco-Chinese Business Council in the presence of the two countries' leaders. I will share Suez's successful experience of enabling its Chinese distinguished customers to improve the quality and performance of water services through digitalization. We have high expectations. We hope that this visit will create even more opportunities for collaboration and innovation in areas such as environmental protection, renewable energy, and sustainable development.
In 2021, China committed to bring the carbon emissions to a peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Given that your work is very much related to sustainability, what do you make of China's efforts on environmental protection in recent years?
At Suez, we fully support China's dual carbon goals, reaching peak carbon emissions before 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality before 2060. Of course, we want to play an active role in the country's efforts toward a greener future. And Suez is not only a consumer, but also a producer and provider of energy in China. Our robust industrial cooperation models with Chinese partners have allowed us to make significant progress towards energy efficiency and decarbonization. So, for example, in Shanghai Chemical Industry Park, SCIP, we produce and supply energy to our partners while operating one of Asia's largest hazardous waste treatment facilities. So when you look at our value chain decarbonization, we are providing sustainable solutions to our clients in China. For example, in Dalian, we use waste from the refining process of our upstream chemical clients to treat wastewater, reducing both types of waste while contributing to our low carbon commitments. We will continue to invest in our partnerships and R&D in China to help China to achieve its dual carbon goals.
Let's move on to some of the business headlines we're tracking at the hour. German industrial production rose more than expected in February thanks to a strong bounce in car industry as the sector started to shake off supply issues. Output rose 2% on a monthly basis after rebounding 3.7% in January. India's central bank held interest rates steady on Thursday because of unprecedented uncertainty in the global markets. The bank led the benchmark repurchase rate at 6.5% after announcing hikes at all 6 of its prior meetings since May 2022. Latest U.S. Labor Department report shows that initial claims for state unemployment benefits stood at 228,000 last week, which is more than a Reuters poll which had expected a 200,000 jobless claims in the latest week. And now to China's services sector, where a private survey showed services activity jumping to a 28-month high in March. Strong new orders and job creations in the services sector propelled activity much higher than market expectations. The Caixin Services Purchasing Managers Index increased to 57.8 last month from 55 last month, while the 50-point mark separates expansion and contraction in activity. The services sector employment index also hit its highest level since December 2020 as companies boosted hiring in response to a rapid recovery. And Caixin Services PMI survey focuses on smaller-sized private firms, while the trend showed by Caixin survey of services activity in March was in line with the official PMI released by China's National Bureau of Statistics. China's tax officials have expressed confidence that the country will be able to achieve economic growth of 5% this year. Officials indicated that the strong growth seen in the first quarter of the year is an indication that the economy is well on the recovery path. Our reporter Lu Sui has more.
Chinese officials say China's economy is showing a general trend of growth. The rebound in the economy has been underway since the first quarter of this year.
Although we're facing uncertainties domestically and internationally to achieve goals of high-quality development, we still face challenges. I still believe that China will achieve the economic growth target of 5% this year.
China's firms are also becoming more confident in production. For example, in March, procurement by enterprises nationwide increased by around 14% year-on-year.
To help realize China's high-quality development, we will continue to construct tax authorities, actively implement tax policies to stimulate market vitality. We will also deepen reform and innovation when carrying out plans.
Officials also say they will continue to help private companies, creating an amiable business environment. Lu Sui, CGTN, Beijing.
And with that, I'm wrapping up this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Lily Lu in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.